It's a wonderful Friday morning, and you are welcome once again to our Living in the Digital World series. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. American Spaces provides access to current and reliable information about the United States through book collections, internet assets, events, and activities for everyone. My name is Estella H. Anneman, and I am the coordinator for American Corner Aboba. And I'm so excited to be moderating this session live from American Corner Aboba. So what will you do if your personal or business data was compromised right now? Cyber attacks are happening more often and they can be devastating if you are not prepared. So today we are going to learn the immediate steps you need to take in the face of an attack and how to protect yourself in the future. Leading this discussion is Derek Brown. He's a seasoned professional with a Bachelor of Science in Information Technology from the University of Ghana. His credentials include a Certified Ethical Hacker certification from the EC Council and an EGJPT certification from eLearn Security. He has 2 years experience as a former instructor at Coding Dojo and 5 years as a short course instructor in the computer science department from the University of Ghana. So during the session, please type all your comments or questions in the comment box and they'll be well addressed. Thank you so much for staying with us. Over to you, Derek.
Thank you, Estella, for that introduction. I do appreciate that. I would share my screen shortly. Let me get that up here. All right. Good morning. Once again, we are back with Living in the Digital World series, and today we'll be focusing on cybersecurity. So we will be looking at what cyber attacks are, how to respond to them, and whenever these things happen, we have to look at how can these responses be done. Should they be immediate or should they be long-term? So today, our topic is responding to cyber attacks, immediate actions, and long-term security for your devices. So first of all, I'm Derek Brown, and as Estella said, she's done an amazing job introducing me, so I won't go into that. So I would be your moderator for today, and I'll be taking you through the agenda for this session. So today we'll introduce ourselves to the topic and what it is, what cyber attacks are, why we are doing this, what are the signs that you have been attacked. So as an individual, if you notice some of these things happening on your devices, then you know that this is an example of an attack. And then we would also look at what are some of the immediate actions you could take after a cyber attack, what are the long-term security measures you can put in place so that these attacks do not happen again. And then we'll look at some real-world cyber attacks. So we'll look at, I think, 2 attacks. And then out of these 2 attacks, we would actually look at a quick demonstration of how one of these attacks look like and how dangerous it is. Then finally, we'll look at some best practices on how you can protect your devices. And then we'll get into the Q&A. So when we talk about cyber attacks, these are basically cybersecurity incidents, right? Most of the time, we limit ourselves to I was hacked, someone hacked me, this happened. But then it goes more than that. Sometimes you could experience malware, which includes virus, it includes spyware, and a whole lot of things, and sometimes even ransomware. And then other times you could experience a social engineering attack where someone tricks you into giving specific information. So when you see all of these emails that are telling you you've won $1 million or you've won 1 million Ghana cedis, or they tell you, you know, the popular one, I sent you money, can you send it back to me or give me your PIN, or we are blocking the attacker's number. All of these are examples of social engineering, all right? So the other thing is also the fact that as we develop as a people, right, in terms of technology, as we experience lots of technological advancements, we are also going to experience lots of cybersecurity attacks. In the past, I don't think our refrigerators were able to connect to the internet. In the past, I don't think our TVs were able to connect to the internet. So in all those years, TVs were not, it was quite hard to exploit them over the internet. They experienced a few manual hacks here and there. When I say hacks, I don't mean going through the network, but you know how they could modify what was in there, replace it and all of that. So But then in recent years, because now all these devices can connect to the internet or can connect to a network, then it becomes a bit easy for attackers to exploit them. So the more we develop or the more we have technological advancements, the more cyber attacks we are going to experience. So due to this, we need to know how to respond quickly to these things, and also how we can put our systems into a position where these attacks do not happen so frequently. Irrespective of what you do, you are going to experience them. So you need to be more vigilant, and you need to know how to prevent them or how to mitigate. Mitigation means making sure that the likelihood of these things happening is lowered. Irrespective of what you do, they would still happen or they might still happen. So your best course of action is to lower the likelihood of these things happening. So today, we are going to equip ourselves with some knowledge to be able to understand how, even as an individual or a business, what are some of the immediate and long-term actions you can take in the event of an attack. We are going to be looking at certain signs that show that you've experienced an attack, all right? And I think with this particular thing, I forgot to say one thing earlier. With the real world scenarios we'll be looking at, we'll have like a quick demo on one of these scenarios. So stay tuned for that at the end of this. And then back to this side. So when it comes to signs that you have experienced an attack, it's quite broad, and you can't put your finger on saying that, okay, it's just like, let's say I'm here and that someone is going to say, what's the possibility that you've bathed today, right? And someone would say, oh, if his hair is kept well, that means he's bathed, right? Another person would say, if there's no this, if there's no that, if he's wearing clean clothes. So there are so many ways to tell if someone is looking clean or not. It's not just one way. But the same way with cyber attacks, you can't limit yourself to just one thing, or let's say 5 things, and say, because of this and this and this, I can say that I'm experiencing a cyber attack. Also, besides all of this, recently I had one of my students reach out to me to ask me that, can I tell her what are the signs that someone has been attacked? And it was quite a good coincidence that it's sort of related to this session that I'm doing here. So when she asked, she provided about 15 to 20 different signs that an attack has happened. And I looked through the signs and I could determine that, yes, every single one of them, right? So 1 to 15 or 1 to 20, every single one of them could prove that an attack might be happening. So I got back to her and I was like, I don't think I can pick any single one of these, because all of these can relate to different type of attacks. So everything here is valid. So the same way, if I'm going to talk about signs that an attack has happened, I just want you guys to know that even though I'm going to explain about 5 of these, we should not limit ourselves to just these 5, because it can be broad, it can be a lot of them, all right? So the first one we are looking at is unusual system behavior. So if you have a system, a desktop computer or a laptop or a mobile phone, and that system starts to operate slowly, then you need to now be very suspicious of what's happening. Now, it's not all the time that these signs prove that an attack is happening. Sometimes it could just be that your systems are tired, right? They've been through a lot and they just want to break. But other times too, if you are going to do further investigation, it could also be that you may be experiencing an attack. So slow performance may be a sign, because sometimes when an attack is happening, it could be that whoever is doing it is in the background trying to maybe send some data somewhere, change certain files, and we'll see that in action later. And then also we have unresponsiveness, right? You are clicking on something, it's not responding. You are doing something here, it's not responding. And then also we have frequent crashes. So when we talk about crashes, anytime you are using your computer and then let's say you have a blue screen pops up, or maybe the whole system just goes off randomly, we call that a system crash. So in the same way, if you are using computers and it keeps doing that, we say that if you're experiencing that too frequently, then you need to be suspicious that either the operating system may be having issues, or you may be experiencing a cybersecurity attack. We also have suspicious pop-ups or unknown programs launching on your device. You are using your computer, all of a sudden something pops up on the screen. You have to be suspicious about that, right? If it happens once in a while, it's fine. But if it's happening every now and then, you see these pop-ups showing up, or a program that you did not install, just pops up on your screen and you're like, nope, I don't think I installed this, then you need to be suspicious. It could be that the attackers are having a field day on your machine. They are just using your system for a picnic. So you always need to be wary of some of these things happening. The next thing we are looking at is unauthorized access or activity on your account, right? It could be an email, it could be a work account. Let's say you are logging into a work website and stuff like that. So whenever you see that, I think in the past, I don't know if it happens now, but whenever you use a system in your current location, and then you change your location to a different place, and you log into that same system again, they send you a notification to your email telling you that we've seen these actions going on and we want to confirm if it's really you that is logging in, right? That is your provider or whatever system you are using providing you with access and activity information, telling you that we've seen this going on and we just want to confirm if it's you. And then they would be like, if it's you, you don't need to do anything. If it's not you, log into your account and then change your password and maybe reach back out to us. So if you notice that at some point in time, I think so many years ago, over a decade ago, I was using my Facebook account, and then I got a notification that I've accessed it from one of these other countries, which I'm not going to mention. And I was like, nope, that is not me, because even if I was using a VPN, I would have known, but that was not me. So then I had to do an investigation, go into the account. I noticed it wasn't me, the country was not, a whole lot of things. And that was really good. So anytime you experience unauthorized access, you notice someone has entered into your account or been able to get into your account and all of that, you always need to be wary. And the first thing you need to do is try to log in as soon as possible, change your password and all of that. Because if an attacker gets access to your account, the next thing they are going to do is to remove some of the security features on the account. So if you have two-factor authentication set up, they might try to disable it. If you have a number on that system, they may try to remove that number so that you don't even get the two-factor authentication code. They do a lot of things just to make sure that you don't get to retrieve your account. So, and when they get into one account, because we don't like to change passwords, the attacker can now move after accessing, let's say, your email. They can try it on several websites they think you might already have access to, and then they are good. They might have a field day with your details. The next one is detection by antivirus software and security monitoring tools. So if you have an antivirus, there's a high possibility your antivirus has probably notified you of certain files it's noticed at some time in your lifetime, right? So it would be there, and then those times, I think it was Avast, you hear the sound, kum, kum, kum. Once you hear it, they've seen something, like it's noticed something malicious and it's telling you. And that tells you that, okay, I might have some malicious software, or I might have some malicious things on my system that need to be looked at. Now, whenever you experience this, I'll go into how you can respond to this later. But every now and then, when we look at cyber attacks, we always think about a hacker trying to get on your system, right? Just like the movie, someone sits on the behind their systems, they do in, and then we are all excited, like, oh yes, they've hacked. But no, it's not the time that is about that. As I explained a few slides ago, I mentioned that it could sometimes be that someone is trying to trick you into providing information. It could just be that you downloaded a software that was compromised, and due to that, once you activate or click on that software, it's going to perform a bigger attack. So all of this means that it's not only limited to someone hacking into your account, but it could just be these files that you have that are malicious. And then also, another sign that shows that you may be experiencing a cybersecurity attack or a cyber attack is where you notice there are changes to your files, right? Or maybe your passwords you are logging in and they're telling you your password is not what you think it is. How can you have the same password for 6 months and then you try to log in again, they'd say that the password is wrong, because at that point it's muscle memory. It's very easy for you to remember. So all of these are very suspicious, and that should tell you that I may be getting attacked. And then sometimes if your data is locked, right? So that is in the case of a ransomware, and that is what we'll be looking at later. So what are some immediate actions you could take? We are not going to make this very long, because if we are going to make this very long, just like the signs, we'll probably have about 100 of actions that you could take in case you experience a cybersecurity, but we're going to limit this to just 6. Now, these are not in chronological order, even though some people may do that, but you could start from anywhere. So let's start. So anytime you notice that you may be experiencing an attack or you suspect that you may be experiencing an attack, one thing we always say as professionals is isolate that particular device from the network, right? We are not saying shut it down, because if you shut it down, then you may lose important evidence. So do not shut it down. But then one thing you can do is that just isolate it. Now, how do you isolate it? Whatever system it is, whatever attack it is, in the case of an attacker or a hacker trying to get on your system, they are trying to do that through the internet. So they are having access to your system, trying to implement whatever they are doing through the internet. So if you turn off your internet or disconnect from whatever network you are connected to, that means you've blocked the access the attacker has to your system, right? So this is not just in the case of individuals, it also applies to an organization as well. So in the same way, if that is happening, then you need to, once you isolate it, you are sort of blocking it out. Now, in the case of, let's not look at a hacker, let's look at the case that you have a virus, right? You've installed a software, you downloaded a software thinking it's something you wanted, and apparently it's a virus. And so you click on it thinking you're about to use the software, and then you realize that, okay, this thing is actually a virus. Now, most viruses, what happens is that immediately you activate or you click on them, these viruses would sometimes try to connect to the internet, and then they go to download the real virus. It's funny I'm using the word real virus, but in this case, let's assume it's the real virus, right? So whatever you have is more like a smaller version of it that is trying to evade detection. So once you activate or click on it, it's going to go onto the internet. The attacker that created it, all these viruses did not come out of thin air. They were all created by humans. Someone created it for a purpose, right? So once you click on it, they will try to connect to specific malicious websites the attacker originally designed to download maybe extra software that can be used for the bigger attack on your system. So when you click on these things, it's trying to connect to a remote location to get a newer file so that it can do what it wants to do. So if you're isolating or you disconnect from your network, when this type of virus is trying to connect to that external source, it will not work because your internet has been disconnected. So that is why it's always good to disconnect, because once you disconnect, you've isolated. When you isolate, you reduce the spread of the virus, or you reduce the intensity of the virus. Then the next thing you could do is, after you've sort of disconnected or isolated to limit the spread, then you will now try to assess the scope of the attack, right? Some of these things sound very technical. It looks like, wait, how can I do this? I'm not an IT person. Nope. Any lay person could do this. And that is why we do some of these sessions and training, so that you get familiar with these things, so you don't wait and call someone and say, I think I'm experiencing that, and you wait for them to come before they help you, right? If you are working in an organization, it may be a bit different, but if it's on the individual level, you can take some of these steps on your own just to limit or safeguard yourself. If it's an organization, step 3 will come in. So assessing the scope of the attack. Now, with this, after you've isolated, you would want to assess the scope, right? You want to know what just happened. What type of attack am I experiencing? Is it a malware? So malware is like a bigger term for viruses, software, spyware, so many types, right? So in this case, you need to know what type of attack you just experienced, right? So under malware, you could ask, is it ransomware, or is it just a virus, or is it even a Trojan? So Trojans are mostly softwares that you install. They look like they are doing one thing, but apparently they have a hidden agenda. So sometimes you would download, let's say, a fake Zoom, maybe thinking it's Zoom, but apparently it's not Zoom, or maybe a Zoom alternative, but it's not Zoom. It's actually a virus. So once it gets on your system, it will do its real intent. So you need to assess and know what is happening, what is the scope, what is the spread, how many devices have been infected. Has it just infected your phone, or did it spread to every other device on your system? Or sometimes in the case of an organization, you need to check, did it infect one employee? Did it infect all other employees in that department? Did it spread out? Did it go to our third-party vendors? Did it even extend to our customers? You need to assess it to know where you stand, right? And then you may also decide to report the incident. So in an organization, most of the time, you would report to the IT department, let them know, hey, I think I'm experiencing this, my system is doing that, and then they will come in to check what is happening. Now, in certain organizations, they have what we call the incident response team or the cyber incident response team. And their job or their role is to respond to the incident. They are mostly part of the IT department. So just like if you have a fire at home or if you have a fire, we are going to call the Ghana Fire Service, right? To let them know that we are experiencing a fire, so they should come in to help. They are the team we call to help respond to that particular incident, which is the fire. So in the case of cybersecurity attacks, we also have that, we have a group that has been designated by each organization to respond to their incident. In certain cases, if it's that huge, they may have to go with external sources, go with another IT company helping them. Sometimes you also have to inform law enforcement agencies. Every organization has how they deal with this, right? Because if you are working in an organization, don't try and disconnect things from the internet, because once you do these things, you may be compromising evidence. So always report it and let the necessary people do the job, right? Then you can also, some of the immediate actions you can take is to change passwords immediately, right? Because yes, you are experiencing an attack, and it could be that they might have stolen certain data from you. So change your passwords, go into all your accounts and change them. Now, this will be easy because most of you keep the same passwords everywhere. So just go and change them. Now, that is not even advisable. Always try to have different passwords. We will say that, how can I remember them? It's fine. You can always have what we call a password manager that keeps all your passwords, and that makes it easy, right? So change your passwords. It's always important. And then you can also run a full system scan. Most of us have antiviruses. If you are using a Windows system, you have the Microsoft Defender by default. Some people would prefer to have external antivirus softwares on their systems. Organizations have this as well. Immediately you've gone through this, do a full system scan. Don't do a quick scan, do a full system scan, because a full system scan will sweep through every single file, every single crevice on your computer, and you'd be good. Then the last thing is backups. So backups are very important, right? If you experience an attack, one of the things you can do is just back up immediately, because you know the attack is spreading. So back up whatever you have. You should have already backed up before the attack happens so that you can restore the backup. But in case some of these attacks are happening, let's say as an organization, it's happened only in the, let's say, finance department, then what you could do is you could start doing the backups for the other departments so that in case it spreads to them, we would still be able to restore them back to normal if that happens. So these are some immediate actions we could take. You experience it, you take these actions, you're able to limit it, and you're able to respond to it properly and promptly. Then we are going to look at some long-term measures, right? So what do you do in order to ensure that these things do not happen again in the future? Because you've experienced it, right? Even if you've not experienced it yet, and you've not experienced any attack, as we are all here, the thing you should be doing are these steps, because what you are doing is you are trying to mitigate, reduce the likelihood of attacks happening by having enough security in place. So the first step is updates and patch systems regularly, right? If you have whatever system you have, there's always updates, unless it's a legacy system. So a legacy system are systems that are too old, or whoever designed it no longer provides support and updates to it. So if you are using, for example, if you are using an iPhone 4, I don't think Apple provides updates for an iPhone 4 anymore. So, excuse me. So, with this being said, if the system is too old, the manufacturer may decide that yes, we have too many new systems that we can't allocate our team members to keep supporting or providing updates for this particular type of software. So, if it's a legacy software, then we have other ways of protecting and making sure it doesn't experience an attack. But with our normal devices, there's always updates, always updates. And sometimes you think about, oh, I don't have the data to update. Would you rather your system be compromised, or you would put in the resource to get the update so that you don't experience an attack? So one of the attacks we'll look at, we'll notice that it was clearly because people were not updating. So we have to be careful of that. Updates are important. Patches are there to, patches are mostly updates, but then for security. So they are updates, but they are there to target certain security loopholes and to help the system be more secure. Implement multi-factor authentication. Now, with multi-factor authentication, whenever you are logging into a system, that is a form of authentication. You are sort of verifying who you are to the system, and then they log you in. So sometimes username and password, email and password is not enough. you need to implement multi-factor authentication. Whenever you are logging into a system and they said, we've sent a code to your email, we've sent a code to your phone number, there's an example of a multi-factor authentication. In certain organizations, they don't use just these two. They sometimes even add an extra layer of security, which could be biometric. It could be your fingerprint. It could be biological, probably like your eyes and stuff like that. So all of these are methods that can be used. And when you do this, even if an attacker attacks you, they are not successful because they need to have all these other things in place. So they need to have, okay, I won't go into that because that would take us to a new tangent, which is to go deep into multi-factor authentication. So next thing we can look at is using encryption. So encryption is where you are protecting data. And most of the time we do this for data that is being transmitted, right? So you can have encryption for data that is being stored, so storage. Also, we call that data at rest or data at storage. And then we have data in transit. That means data that is being transmitted. When you are logging into a website, your data is being transmitted, or the information you are providing is being transmitted from your home to that remote location. If it's Facebook, yes, it's leaving your home to Facebook. So with all of this being done, if that data is not protected, anyone can just intercept it and be able to read whatever is happening. So most websites, when you visit and you see HTTPS, the S there is for secure, and it's also for SSL and TLS. So these things provide security for data that is being transmitted over the internet or over a network. The other times you could also have encryption on your local devices where, yes, I have my laptop, but I can encrypt all the data on here. Encryption is where you put the data in a particular state. You are sort of protecting it so that other people, even if they chance on the data, they won't be able to decrypt or make sense out of it, right? And then the next thing we are looking at is regularly backing up data. We talked about that in the previous slide, and we are talking about that now. As an organization, in the case of an organization, it's always good to back up your data, right? You need to make backups. You need to make backups because if you experience an attack and you've lost your system, you've lost your backups. I think one time, yep. So a friend of mine reached out and he was like, hey, do you know how to stop a ransomware attack? And I'm like, most attacks are stoppable, but ransomware attacks, no. And then he explained to me that his system experienced a ransomware attack. And there was nothing you could do because those type of attacks, when they infect you, they encrypt or change the format of your files. So you can't even use the files and they tell you to pay money, right? Now, after a while, they give you some timeline and then they delete all your files. So with this being said, ransomware attacks, he experienced it and there was nothing you could do. So all you could do in such a case is just to reinstall a new operating system because your files are gone. You are not even if you pay, you might not even get your files back. So your files are gone. And in that case, you need to sort of just install a new one. But then if you had a backup, of all your files somewhere, you could just install a new OS, bring back your files, and you're good. So in the case of organizations and institutions, they mostly make backups so that in case they experience a cyber attack, they can always restore these backups on their system. As an individual, even when we use applications like WhatsApp, every now and then they are like weekly backup, daily backup, and sometimes we ignore it. It's just for our own good. Because if you are not backing up and maybe you lose, I think sometimes WhatsApp keeps these things in certain online repositories. But if you are not backing up and you lose your device or maybe something happens, the only data you get is the data from your last backup, not your most recent data. So if you don't back up your most recent data, you will not get it whenever you restore your data from a future backup. Then establishing a cybersecurity incident response plan. So I talked about the incident response team with the fire service where you experience the fire, you call them. In cybersecurity or in IT, if you experience a cybersecurity incident, you call the incident response team. So organizations have to develop an incident response plan. And with that, you need to plan. You need to decide if we are experiencing this type of attack, what do we do? How would we be able to detect it? How would we be able to contain it? After containing, how will we eradicate it? After that, how would we be able to recover our system back to the level that they were before the attack? And then in the end, you do some lessons learned, right? So this is what an incident response plan is. I just listed all the steps of an incident response plan. So if you are doing all of these things, when you have an incident response plan in place, that means you have certain things in place to make sure that if you experience an attack, this is how you would respond as an organization. And then the last one, which I love so much, is to train employees in cybersecurity awareness. All these while we've been talking about technology. Even with the incident response plan, we are going to use technology to respond. But here we are looking at training employees in cybersecurity awareness. We always think about technology and ignore the humans that set up the technology. We ignore the humans that use the technology. So in this case, we are saying that if you don't train your employees, you are putting yourself in harm's way, because most of the times, the first point of contact for attacks are mostly the employees or the humans. If I receive an email telling me I've won lots of money, I'm a human being and I'm the one that clicked on it for the whole thing to be activated. If I'm going to download a malicious file, it's the human that did it. If I'm going to click on it and do all of this, it's the human that did it. And that is why we do such trainings, to sort of create that awareness, to let us know that you don't wait for the cybersecurity department all the time. You should be able to detect some of these things on your own. So the more you train your employees, the more you train yourself, even as an individual, you get to be, you put yourself in a position not to be vulnerable to some of these attacks. So training is very important. And I love the fact that people are getting into that state where constant training is also a possibility. So now let's look at some real-world cybersecurity attacks. So case 31, in 2013, Target experienced a data breach, right? So what happened is that an attack happened, and that attack stole 40 million credit and debit cards. And this was in 2013. So what they did is, how did this attack happen? They mostly exploited Target through a third-party vendor. So you know how organizations have third parties that they communicate with or they take things from. So they have like a direct line or secure connection to these third parties. So that was how they were exploited. So how was the breach detected? So they detected the breach because there was a virus, it was a malware, right? And they noticed this whilst they were doing a security audit. So during a security audit, they noticed that there was a malware on the system, and that was when they noticed that they had experienced an attack. So if they had not done the security audit, this virus would not have been known, okay? And so what are some of the immediate and long-term responses that Target took in order to recover from this? So one of the things they did is they hired a CISO. So CISO is Chief Information Security Officer. So you know how you have a CEO who deals with the whole organizations. We have a CISO whose job is to be part of the top management, but their job is to deal with the cybersecurity side of things. So Chief Information Security Officer, sometimes the Chief Information Officer, that is their job. So they hired a CISO, and then besides that, they also accelerated the adoption of what we call chip-enabled cards. So chip-enabled cards are these debit and credit cards that have a chip on there, and the job of that chip is to provide extra security. It encrypts the data on there. So even if, you know how we say that if you have a card and someone else can actually pass by you and copy all the data from your credit card or your debit card. So with these cards that have the chip enabled, even if you pass by and you try to copy the data from it, or let's say you get it close to it to copy the data, that chip provides extra security, it provides extra encryption that prevents the data from being copied. And also, even if you copy it, that data will not make sense to you. So their long-term response was to accelerate the adoption of those cards so that even if they experience another attack, it would not be easy for these things to work. So one of the lessons they learned was that they need better third-party vendor management because the attack came from a third-party vendor, right? So Target, as big as they are, experienced an attack that compromised 40 million credit and debit cards. Then in 2017, the WannaCry ransomware attack happened, right? So this type of attack infected 230,000 computers in 150 countries. right? So it was just spreading. And what they did was that they exploited a vulnerability in the Windows operating system called Eternal Blue. It's a very popular one, which has to do with the SMB protocol. So Microsoft had already provided a patch or an update for that particular vulnerability to say that, hey, this is an update, install it as soon as possible. As usual, some people did it, a lot of people did not, because, well, I don't want to do updates. I need to use my computer now. The update is going to slow me down. So they did not. Then, since they did not, the attackers created what we call a ransomware. And a ransomware is a type of attack, because I'm going to show you how this type of attack looks like. So it's a type of attack that when it gets on your system and it's activated, it's going to change the format. It's going to encrypt every single file you have. So it's going to change the format of your files. So that way you can't use your files. At the same time, you can't also copy them, because even if you copy them, it doesn't make sense. And then they put this on your screen and tell you that, hey, you know what? You need to pay this amount of money to us. And when you pay this amount of money to us, we'll give you a key to get back your system. Now, there's a 99% chance you won't even get your key. You won't get the thing that helps you get your system back. So this is what happened. And then they modify all your files into a state that it can be used. And then they ask you for a ransom. That's why it's called a ransomware attack. So they put you in a state where you want to pay the money, you pay it and you still not get your system back. So that's what they did. So they set this up and it's infected 230,000 devices, right? So what are some immediate steps organizations took to mitigate the damage? So one of the things they did was the attack was targeting what we call the SMB protocol. So what they did was they disabled that SMB, the version 1 protocol, because SMB had been updated to version 2. I don't know about version 3. So they disabled that SMB protocol, and then they also applied every emergency patch that could have been patched. And then they also isolated these machines from the network. So you could see that we are talking about immediate steps they took. They experienced an attack. They first of all disabled that particular protocol. They started installing all updates that needed to be installed. They isolated these machines from the network so that it does not infect other devices. So in the end, it was because they were using systems that had old updates, or systems that had received updates and they had not updated. So then we will say that you are using outdated systems. So that is the main issue here. And the lessons learned is that it's very important to patch and update your software. So then how do you, the question is, how do you prevent a ransomware attack, right? Whenever it happens, you have to isolate your infected systems. You also have to assess the attack to see which systems have been infected. Is it just you? Is it other people? And then you report it, just like what I said earlier, right? Now, the other thing is that do not pay the ransom. Do not, absolutely do not, because even if you pay, you're not going to get your system back. It's the money they're interested in, not your freedom or your happiness. So they take the money and they're like, okay, thank you for your service, and then you'll still lose your system, right? So always do not pay the ransom, conduct a security audit, apply security patches, restore from backups. That is how you can sort of help yourself from a ransomware attack. But the main thing is, if you had backups, these things do not bother you, because you just uninstall or reset your system, and then you get your system back up and running, right? So I'm going to carry on, and then we would be looking at a quick demonstration of how this ransomware attack works. This will not infect you in any way. This is very safe. So I'll do this in a controlled environment, which I'll do shortly. So best practices for device security. I think we've talked about some of these, but as an individual, you need to use strong and unique passwords. Don't put your mother's name and add 123 to it. Don't put your pet's name. Don't put your husband or your wife's name or the person you love the most, or your kid's name. Don't do that. It's very easy to find some of these names. Unless it's a very unique name, then fine. But if you know it's a common name like Derek, don't do that. It's very terrible. So enable firewalls and use antivirus programs. Always make sure that you have these. Most of the time on your system, these things are activated by default. But then there are certain viruses that are so smart that they get on your system and they are able to disable your antivirus for you. They are like, okay, yeah, but hold on a minute, let me disable these things, and then they start executing. So those viruses are very powerful. And regularly monitor your devices for unusual activity. We've talked about these unusual activities earlier. Use secure Wi-Fi networks, right? If the Wi-Fi is insecure, use a VPN. Or even if you connect to a Wi-Fi that has no, when we say secure, basically Wi-Fi that has a password is mostly secure. Wi-Fi that has no password, like free Wi-Fi, is very dangerous, especially Wi-Fi in public areas. Even if it has a password, be wary, because the same way you have the password, other people also have the password, and sometimes it's not all that safe. So when you connect to free Wi-Fi, even if it has a password or not, always make sure you don't communicate or do any sensitive stuff on such Wi-Fi, just maybe basic stuff. If you want to do sensitive stuff, make sure you have a VPN in place. And then also limit access and permissions, right? If you are using a system, make sure that you are limiting the permission. Let's say on Windows, whenever you try to use a new system, let's say, just a sec. So on Windows, whenever you are trying to open up a software, they bring the screen and they say, are you sure you want to execute this? All of these they are asking you to make sure it's like an access thing, making sure that you don't do things you're not supposed to do. And then the other part is give people access to only the things they need to have access to, right? So even if you have softwares on your system that tell you we need permission for this, that, you don't need to give them all that permission. You need to restrict them so that they do not infect your system. All right. So implement zero trust architecture. So zero trust architecture is where we assume that you want to get, let's say, in an organization, right? Some people assume that once an employee is connected to the internal Wi-Fi, or once anyone is connected to the internal network, they are an employee, and we don't need to authenticate or ask them for their username and password. That's because you are trusting them. You are assuming and trusting. Now, zero trust architecture is where you don't trust anybody and say, irrespective of your location, irrespective of where you are connected to, even if you are an employee that just logged in 5 minutes ago, I need you to log in again to verify who you are. So that is where zero trust architecture comes in. And this helps a lot because once you do this, even if an attacker is able to steal a legitimate staff's credentials, they are not able to do so many things because they always have to authenticate themselves. And that sometimes can help the organization realize that why is this employee trying to access this particular file? Why is this person doing this? And they can sometimes detect some of these things. So at this point, we are going to move into a controlled environment to look at how a ransomware like the one I just talked about looks like, right? So we are going to look at the WannaCry ransomware in my controlled environment. So what you see here is not my Windows operating system. I'm using a Windows operating system, but then I have a virtual environment. So let me show this before. So you can see that I have all these devices that are virtual environment, that anything I do here does not infect or does not go into my system, right? So I'm going to go back into that virtual environment. And then this is the virtual environment. So this is an operating system, as you can see, is a test environment. Is what we call a sandbox. So it's airtight. Anything that happens here does not bleed over into a different system or whatnot. Everything stays here. And if you look at the network connection, this device is not connected to the network. So everything that happens here stays here. All right. So this is the WannaCry ransomware. I have it now. This is a home lab I have set up to learn more about threat intelligence and threat analysis. So that's why I have this here. So before we start, we can see this image titled Cosmo.jpg is a legit image, right? And then pay attention to the extension. It says JPEG. This is install PS1. There's a PowerShell script, PS1, right? And this is the ransomware. Now, when this used to happen, when people were infected by this, right, I'm going to activate or detonate it and see what is going to happen. So once I click on run as administrator, for now, only 4 files are on this system, right? So if I do this, that means the ransomware has been activated. It's going to ask me, do you want to allow this app to run? And I'll say yes. And then let's take a look at what is going to happen in the next few. Now, this is my background too. So when this ransomware gets on your system, this was in 2017, right? When this ransomware used to get on your system, it will start performing certain actions in the background. You don't see it, but it starts changing certain files. It starts encrypting stuff. It starts to do so many things so that you don't even notice that things are happening, right? So it's going to good. So you can see that files are popping up. We used to have only 4 files. Now we have please read me. We have WannaCry. I've not clicked on anything. Our Cosmo.jpg has turned into Cosmo.jpg.wncry, which is WannaCry. So WannaCry was the name of the ransomware. But that means whatever file I have has been converted into this format. I've still not clicked on anything. We will see it's going to a pop-up will show up shortly. So that means every file I have is being changed. An image popped up. My background will change very shortly. So all of this is happening when I haven't done anything, all because I have activated the ransomware in my control environment. And so this is how some of these things work, right? So you notice that the legitimate image is still here, Cosmo.jpg, but then the cat icon is still not there. And then the real file has been changed into this, good. So you can see that that also popped up, good. And then the image I just clicked on just vanished. Like I just highlighted that it's gone. Cosmo.jpg is gone. So your legitimate files would all be taken, thrown somewhere, and then they will be converted into a new format. So with this, these things are being encrypted. Now we have this warning, and then they even change my background as well. So it says, oops, your important files are encrypted. If you see this text, don't see the blah, blah. They are telling you, if you don't see it, go and click on the software, right? So let's look at what they are saying. They are saying that, oops, your files have been encrypted. Many of your documents, photos, whatnot, are no longer accessible. You can't open them. Let's see if I open this Cosmo.jpg. If I double click on that, nothing happens. That image cannot even show up, right? Let me leave there. And then they tell you that, hey, if you want to recover your files, we need you to send $300 worth of Bitcoin to this address. That's what they're saying, because they know that if they put it on Bitcoin, they will be able to find ways to get it back up, right? And then they are telling you what you need to do, times you need to check if the payment worked and stuff. And then let's look at the left side. It says payments will be raised on, that means in about 2 days or 3 days, they will change the payment from $300 to maybe something else to $400. And then they are saying that they've given me about 6 days, 24 hours. So that makes it 7 days. And they've given you 7 days to say that your files will be lost on the 4th of October. So that means if you don't pay the ransom, every single file you have here is gone. And then if you also don't pay it in 3 days, the payment will be raised. So with this, they are sort of creating this whole, they are putting this fear in you. And especially, imagine this was like a work laptop and you have things installed. Maybe you are working on a very serious project, and maybe you spent about 3 months working on that project and that file, and then you experience a ransomware attack and you've lost access to that file, right? You are going to you are going to be very you will be distressed, because you are like, I need to have that file. I need to pay these guys their money because I need that file as soon as possible. And once you do that, once they put that fear in you, that sense of urgency in you, you might sometimes go and find ways of doing it. You pay the money to them, and they are not even going to get back to you. They are not even going to give it anything to you, right? So this is what a ransomware attack looks like. It did not take more than 5 minutes for this thing to encrypt all our files. And in as much as it's doing this, it keeps encrypting things in the background. So every file I have is still being worked on in the background. I may not see it, but these files are being worked on. So that is a quick demonstration of the WannaCry virus. Now, with this being done, because this is a test environment, I can reverse this operating system into a state that it was before, where the ransomware was not detonated. So I'm going to do that, restore the current snapshot. And then I'm going to go back into my previous state. So that is how awesome this, that is what makes these things very interesting, right? It makes these test environments very interesting, because whatever thing you just did, by just the click of a button, everything is erased and you go back to your previous state. All right. So back to my presentation. So now we've seen what the WannaCry ransomware attack was doing. So in a space of 5 minutes, you've lost your files. You cannot do anything with your system, and you need to pay that money. $300 is no joke. It's a lot of money, and they will keep increasing that money. So some companies paid because it was infecting organizations. That 230,000 almost half of them were businesses. So some of them paid because they wanted their files back, but they did not get anything back, right? So in conclusion, cyber attacks are inevitable, right? No matter how much security you have, the biggest companies, the biggest countries they still experience cyber attacks, right? So they are inevitable, but the best thing you could do is to reduce the likelihood of this happening, and also being able to put things in place so that even if they happen, you are able to respond to it quickly so that you reduce the intensity and the spread or the reach. And then immediate actions help to contain the damage. Long-term actions prevent future attacks. I think I said this earlier. So if you perform the immediate actions, it doesn't spread. You contain the damage. If you perform the long-term actions like multi-factor authentication, the backups, and all of that, you are putting yourself in a position so that future attacks do not happen easily. So in conclusion, stay vigilant, be proactive. Don't wait for the attacks to happen and then be like, wow, Derek said something 30 days ago. He said I should isolate. How do I isolate? No. Try to put the long-term processes in place, right? The long-term practices, put them in place so that you would not be thinking of the immediate actions all the time. All right. So at this point, I'm going to open up for questions and answers. I'm done with my presentation. I want to say a special thank you to a few people that helped me do this. Thank you, Estella. Thank you to Emmanuel Kobiasante that helped me prepare this slide. And thank you to Mobile Web Ghana for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Derek, for this informative and detailed presentation. You've given us a lot to think about when it comes to both responding and preventing cyber attacks. Now, let's get to our audience and take their questions. We have a lot of them coming from the chat box. And so I'm going to start with the first one. That's from Talika Combs. He's asking that what tools and technologies are essential for detecting and responding to cyber attacks?
Okay. So for tools for detecting, I think the first one which we all have access to is antivirus software. For that one, it's the easiest to get access to. For organizations, they may have to install specific software. Maybe they may have to install like an endpoint detection and response software, which for that is for maybe organizations that are huge. But the first line of defense, antivirus software, and then sometimes a firewall. Lucky for us on Windows, we have all these things. So you have to pay attention to them and then always update those times they say update your antivirus, update them so that you don't become a victim of these attacks.
Okay. So those are the basic ones.
Yeah.
What are the complex ones?
Oh, so the complex ones for that in cybersecurity, we have what we call the SIEM, security and information and event management. So with this ones, these softwares, they sort of pick information from all the sources, every application you have, every network you have. They pick up this information, then they aggregate it into a central point where security analysts or security professionals will then be monitoring to see if there are anything that should catch the eye. Now, these softwares also have automated responses in place. And then we also have what we call the intrusion detection system, intrusion prevention system. So these ones operate differently, where an intrusion detection system would see an attack happening, and then they would notify the network administrator or the cybersecurity person or whoever is in charge. An intrusion prevention system would see it, notify you, and then it would act upon it. So I would not want to mention specific types of software because obviously we are not going to do any, we are not going to endorse anyone, but these are the types. So intrusion detection softwares, intrusion prevention system softwares, we have firewalls, we also have a next generation firewall, we have the antiviruses, and then we also have endpoint detection and response. So it's a whole lot of things that we could have in place, especially for organizations.
Right. So thank you so much for that answer. So when you were doing your presentation, you touched on incident response for organizations. And so we have a question from Madam Florence Toffa. She's asking that should backup for organizations be centralized or decentralized?
That's a good question. So centralized and decentralized, I think there are two criteria in this place where we have location centralization where you are creating all the backups and storing it in one location. Now, with the location, the question is, are you storing them in the same location as the business, or you are storing them in an external location? We always advise don't store them in the same location, because in terms of cybersecurity incidents, it's not always a hack. Sometimes you could experience a natural disaster, and that could also affect your operations. So it's always good to have these backups in a different location, right? Now, in terms of that has to do with physical location. Now, in terms of virtual location, as in where do you store the backups? Do you store them on the individual computers of the employees, where the employees themselves are creating the backups on their local systems? Then that sort of puts you in a different situation, right? So it's always advisable that all these backups are being done from a central point, where for most organizations, all these individual employee computers are connected to a wider network. So I don't need to activate the backups on every single machine. I could just give the command from the administrator's end, and I'm able to take backups of every single person's device and then store it in whatever backup location I want. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, so we have another question from Talika. He's asking that how important is it to have a cyber incident response plan, and what key elements should be included?
Great question, Talika. So cyber incident response plan, what was the question? Can you repeat the first part?
Yes, so how important is it to have a cyber incident response plan?
Okay, yes, thank you. So with an incident response plan, it's very important, because sometimes we look at these things and feel like, oh, I'm not a business, or I'm not a big business, so I don't need to have a plan in place, right? We think that, oh, it's only the big businesses that should have this. But then remember that attackers do not care whether you're a big business or you're a small business. So irrespective of your size, you need to have a plan in place. Now, with the plans, there are types of plans and there are magnitude of plans. You could have a plan that is very simplistic to say that, hey, if you experience an attack, we need to plan to prepare for a general form of attack. Now, if that happens, one of the first forms of planning is to make backups and to also have systems in place to detect these things. So you don't have to do the most sophisticated types, but then just the basics. So you do all these things, and then you also find ways to contain them, and then you are good. Now, the sophisticated type of incident response plans is where you have to have a plan that includes a different response for every type of attack. Now, these things are possible for large organizations where it's easy for them. They have the manpower and they have the resources to have these plans in place. So irrespective of the organization size, it's always important to have the plan in place. You don't need to do the most sophisticated plans. Just have a simple one for now, and then later you could work on improving it and making it more comprehensive. Yeah.
Right, so we are away from wrapping up. I think we can just take this question from account. She's asking that, is it worth paying for the ransom? Especially when you're in that spot where you really need the
yeah. So normally, if this was a chat system, I think I would have given this question back to the chat and be like, yep, chat, this is your time to shine. So unfortunately, you would really, really, really need your files. But as we say, you should count your blessings and let it go, unfortunately, because the possibility of you getting your files back, or because they will tell you, they'll give you a key to decrypt your files, right? Because it's been encrypted or it's been sort of padlocked. Now, when you pay that money, all they care about is the money, not your files or whatever. So when you pay that money, they just ignore you and move on, because you're not the only quote unquote customer. You're not the only person they did it. They've done it to 230,000 people. So imagine you've made the payment, you're like, I did not receive my key. Can you guys send me my key? Who do you think is going to respond to you? Most of the time, they won't. So as we say, these are criminals. Their intention is your money. Their intention is not to save you. So once they get what they want, they have no ethics. They have no moral code. So we say that do not pay the ransom irrespective of whatever happens. So just prepare for some of these cases. If you are working on something important, just remember that you could be infected with a ransomware at any point in time. So have some type of security in place. Please do not pay the ransom, because you will not get it back. You will lose money and lose your files. So at least if you lose one, you can sleep well at night.
All right, so please don't pay the ransom, right? So you can have a
100%.
backup for all these. So yes, thank you so much, Derek, for sharing this valuable expertise and practical guidance on how to stay safe in this ever-evolving digital landscape. So we trust everyone has been useful strategies that you can apply both in your personal and professional cybersecurity practices. This program was proudly brought to you by the U.S. Embassy Ghana, American Corner Boba in partnership with Mobile Web Ghana. And that concludes our program. Please follow us on YouTube, subscribe to this channel so that anytime we have a session, you can have a notification. So till we meet again, have a happy weekend. Bye.